Torah Forum is made possible through grants from Computer Exercise and the Old City Cafe.
Iraq comes along and says, holy war. And most of the Arab nations are saying no. The violence in the Middle East that has become sanctified by belief and by tradition and by holy writ will be challenged. So the whole world, with all of its established mistakes, or all of its institutionalized sins, is going to be thrown into confusion. In the United States, we're feeling it already. There's a great confusion. What are we anyway? And what do we stand for anyway? And are we good? Are we the kind of nation we've prided ourselves in being? It is written, and darkness covers the earth, and that's when God's light will shine upon you. So what is this darkness that we're talking about? Darkness means a state of affairs where all nations are antagonistic and there's animosity between all the nations of the world. This doesn't necessarily mean that every nation has its own agenda and nobody gets along with anybody else. It could also mean that the world is divided in two sides. The world is divided into two camps. And so the whole world is against the whole world. In other words, one camp against the other, and each camp has half the world involved, or so on. So what happens when you destroy the whole world? This doesn't mean physically. God didn't create the world to have it destroyed. And also, as we'll learn later, if we get that far, that Rabbi Yishmael taught that in the end of days, the descendants of Yishmael will wage 3 wars of nerves. Mulchama shel muhuma. A war of nerves, of confusion, of tumult. One on the ocean, one on land, and one in a big city. And the one in the big city will be the worst of them all, whatever that means. But we see from it that the war isn't necessarily a physical battle, it's a war of nerves, it's a war of confusion, that the world is thrown into confusion because of the war, not necessarily bloodshed. In fact, the Rebbe, somebody asked the Rebbe the question concerning gas masks and food stocking. What is it called? No, stocking up for food in the shelters, stockpiling food. They asked the Rebbe whether they should do that, and the Rebbe said not to do either. not to buy gas masks, and not in Israel, not to buy gas masks and not to stockpile food, because it's not necessary. And besides, the land of Israel, it says God's eye is upon it constantly from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and there's a special divine providence there, and there's nothing to worry about. And so better not to, because if you do, it causes panic. And that's what this is all about. This is all a war of panic. This is all a war of nerves. So what does it mean? The king of Persia returns and destroys the whole world. Doesn't mean he destroys the world. He throws the whole world into chaos. V'chol umei ha'olam, and all the nations of the world, misra'ashim u'mizbahalim. They panic and they are frightened, v'neiflim al paneihim, and they fall on their faces. V'yisrael misra'ashim u'mizbahalim. And Israel also panics and gets frightened. And they say, Lehecha nove v'nelech. Lehecha nove v'nelech. Where should we go? Where should we go? Or what to do? So God says to them, Banai, my children, al tisyaru, do not be afraid. Kol ma she'asisi le'asisi ela b'shvilchem. All that I am doing, all that I have done only for you. Why are you afraid? Do not be afraid, the time of your redemption has come. And this redemption is not like the first redemption, like the exodus from Egypt. Because after the exodus from Egypt, there was further trouble waiting down the line. More exile, more captivity. But after this redemption, there will never be another pain or captivity to follow. And then in the next chapter he says, the rabbis taught that when Mashiach comes, he will stand on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, on the roof of the temple, and will say to the Jews, humbled ones, the time of your redemption has come. And at that time, God will cause the light of Mashiach and the light of the Jews to spread throughout the whole world, and the whole world will live by that light, will follow that light. As it says, and nations will go by your light, and kings will be guided by your shine. So what's happening, it's nice to know, to be able to interpret and to understand what's going on in the world. What's happening in the world is that there's a war of nerves. There's kind of a showdown that involves an Arab king, Persian king, Syria, and in some way the whole world. So between the three of them, they've basically brought the whole world's attention to the Middle East. And from this whole scene, Mashiach blossoms, or Mashiach becomes revealed. And what it's come down to, as most of the newspapers are saying, and most of the commentators are saying, it's no longer a question of national rights or borders or homeland. It's no longer a nationalistic question or issue. It's become very obviously, it has been for a long time, but it has now become very obviously a religious question. The motivation, the commitment to creating unrest in the Middle East is not over a homeland, but over a religious compunction. If, in fact, it is necessary for the Muslim who believes in Islam to liberate Yerushalayim, to have sovereignty over Yerushalayim, then it is purely a religious question. because Yerushalayim belongs to the Jew. And Yerushalayim is the place where the Beis HaMikdash has to be built by Mashiach. So there was always this question. Mashiach is going to come along, and one of the things Mashiach has to do, so that we know that he is Mashiach, is that he has to build the Beis HaMikdash in its proper place. Well, that is a little problem there. That place is occupied. So how is that going to happen? How's that going to resolve itself? So most people think, well, there'll be a bloody war. But that's not how Mashiach comes. The wars are over. And particularly in this year of miracles, where we've seen revolutions that would ordinarily, historically, cause all sorts of bloodshed, we've seen them happen with very little bloodshed, or practically none at all. So we see that this year of miracles means that the world is going to take giant steps towards this apocalypse, but it'll all come in very positive, bloodless, and moral form. So what we have, that happened to Europe, Eastern Europe. Now the Middle East. The same will probably happen. It'll be a war of nerves. It'll be a showdown not of who has the bigger weapon, but who has truth and God on their side. And what it has to resolve for the world once and for all is that there can't be many religions, many gods. There has to be one belief that binds us, that brings us all together, without demanding any kind of sacrifice on anybody's part. Because again, no bloodshed, no violence, and no coercion. So what needs to happen, and what we're seeing now hopefully is the actual happening, what needs to happen is that the whole world goes back to the original belief and to the original commitment to the commandments given to the world at Mount Sinai. 613 commandments for the Jewish people, a nation of priests, and 7 commandments or 30 commandments to the world, to every human being, by which the human being becomes righteous. And that unifying belief already exists. It's not something we have to impose on anybody. It's central to Christianity, it's central to Islam, and certainly central to Judaism. As we were saying, I think, yesterday or this morning, that the real insight or the real news is not when we discover that the Torah is relevant to Jews. It's when the world discovers that the Torah is relevant to everyone. Then we really have something to write home about, so to speak. So what's going to happen is that the whole world gets thrown into confusion, not because of the price of oil, although that's going to happen too. The whole world gets thrown into confusion, just very simply means the things you were so certain about, the things you were so confident about, you lose confidence. That's real confusion. When you no longer know what's right and you no longer know what to believe, that's confusion. So what's going to happen in the next 30 days, according to the Medrash, in 30 days the year is over. The year of miracles is over. So what's going to happen in the next 30 days is that the world is going to get thrown into a lot of confusion because the world is going to be very disillusioned with a lot of its beliefs and a lot of the things that it's always trusted and put its faith in. And so the world is going to panic, not because of the danger, but because of the rug being pulled out from under us. Because all of our old assumptions will be challenged. So that the violence in the Middle East that has become sanctified by belief and by tradition and by holy writ will be challenged, as it needs to be challenged, because it's immoral. Only how dare you challenge a divine instruction, if in fact it is a divine instruction. But now that is going to happen, because the bloodshed is so unjustified and so unnecessary, and has been going on for so long, accomplishing absolutely nothing, that it really is time to question. I mean, it's inevitable that it be questioned. Why wait any longer? So this is all bringing it to a head. It's time to re-examine what's moral, what's kosher, what's good, what's right, what's holy, what's godly, what does God really want. It's time to examine these things without any holds barred, and take it to its truthful conclusion, regardless of what that conclusion is going to be, and regardless of how you have to rearrange your thinking and your faith and your soul and all the rest of that, because it's time to clean the slate. So this is what's going to happen. The violence that has been sanctified has to be questioned. The anti-Semitism that has been sanctified, institutionalized, and turned into a religion has to be very sharply questioned. Atheism, we've already questioned and tossed away in Eastern Europe. And materialism, which is us, U.S., has to be questioned and replaced with something more valuable. So the whole world, with all of its established mistakes, or all of its institutionalized sins, is going to be thrown into confusion. In the United States, we're feeling it already. There's a great confusion. What are we anyway? And what do we stand for anyway? And are we good? Are we the kind of nation we've prided ourselves in being? We represent goodness in the world. We represent stability. We represent morality. We represent a godly, holy approach to life and to society. Then why are we so helpless? Then why are we so paralyzed? Then why are we sending more and more troops and doing less and less every passing day? Not that we want to have a war, but why don't we have the courage of our convictions? And what are our convictions anyway? So we say, no, we're going to stop this guy. We're not going to permit this. This is evil. But then again, if we have to hurt somebody, well, then we can't do it. So we've got conflicting values that paralyze us, and we end up doing nothing but embarrassing ourselves. So we're going to have to face up to some pretty basic, elementary questions or issues. The world of Islam is going to have to face some pretty strong self-analysis and decide once and for all where they stand in this world and what's right for them, what's wrong for them. And it's predictable. It doesn't take much to predict or to guess that somehow, somewhere in this whole scenario, the Vatican has to get involved, because the issue is the holiness of the city of Yerushalayim. And so there'll be some involvement from Rome, and you have all the ancient players back for another round, for the final round. You have Babylon, which is Iraq. You have Persia, which is Iran. You have Syria, which is Aram. You have the Palestinians, which is the Philistines. And you have the Vatican, which is Rome. So nothing's changed. And they're all fighting over Israel. Nothing's changed. And not over Israel, over one city in Israel, Yerushalayim. Nothing's changed. Only now it's time to get down to some truths and to clear the air and be ready for Mashiach. So with all the attention focused on the Middle East, with all the attention focused on one spot that involves the whole world, And not in a military conflict, but in a showdown of ideologies. This is the kind of stuff that Mashiach is made for. This is the kind of stuff that that changes the world from an unholy place to a holy place. Not another war. Another war isn't going to bring great holiness to the world. We've tried that over and over and over again. We know that that doesn't work. So it's really a conflict of ideals or of ideas. And who resolves a conflict of ideas? Mashiach. That's what he's for. As the Medrash says, Mashiach's light will shine throughout the whole world, and all the nations will go by that light. What does light mean? It means wisdom, instruction, knowledge. And so the next 30 days are going to be very, very exciting and special, and it'll launch the beginning of a new year, the end of the year of miracles, and the beginning of the year of miracles. Because that's what comes after miracles, is miracle of miracles. That will, according to the Medrash, that will outshine, that will cause the miracles of the coming out of Egypt to pale in comparison. Because coming out of Egypt didn't change the world. Gave us our freedom, but it didn't change the world. All the nations heard and they trembled and everybody came and wanted to help and so on, but the world didn't really change because it wasn't Mashiach. Only this time the miracle will be even greater, and the miracle will be the change in the attitudes and in the beliefs and in the convictions and in the behavior of people. And that's why the Rambam says that the prophecy that the wolf will lie down with the lamb, it's usually quoted as the lion will lie down with the lamb, but it actually says the wolf. The wolf will lie down with the lamb. The Rambam says that primarily means that the nations that were like wolves, the warring type, what is that word for animals that eat animals? Yeah, the predatory nations will finally settle down and be able to live side by side with the non-predatory nations, which is the lamb. So the wolf will lie down with the lamb primarily means that people will get along. Eventually, if people get along, that changes the whole balance of good and evil in the world, and then the more literal interpretation of that phrase, that the actual wolf will change his nature and will no longer be predatory either. That will happen after Mashiach comes.
Why is it that, how are these nations just going to change just to listen? Like, we've seen miracles before, people have denied it, and with the revelation, Jews still broke a calf, and it's kind of very easy to deny a miracle and rationalize it away. So why will this time be different?
Oh, it's not that people will become good because they will see miracles. The miracle will be the goodness. That's going to be the miracle. The miracle will be the clarity of vision, the end of confusion. That itself will be the miracle. And we don't need any better example of it. We don't need a better model than what happened in Europe, in Eastern Europe. Ideas were resolved, atheism was rejected, democracy was instituted without miracles or physical miracles. That itself was the miracle. The Berlin Wall came down. That's the miracle. So we're on a roll.
It's not like we're going to see miracles happen. The miracle is going to be that I just don't understand how this truth is going to come on the Muslims who are so convinced that they have the truth and theirs is the right way and they are so wrong.
We've talked about this. On the one hand, the people in the Middle East are very religious people, of religious temperament, of religious tendency, religious inclinations. And so non-religion, secular lifestyles are not welcome there. And even though they were introduced, like under the Shah, Iran was secular and so on, but it doesn't last there. Religious feelings run too deep in that part of the world. And so that's not an option. Secularism is not an option in the Middle East. So some religion has to exist. Belief in God has to exist. A commitment to God has to exist. A lifestyle based on what God wants has to exist. But the details, what does God want, what is the lifestyle, and so on, are obviously wrong, have gotten confused or mixed up, or some mistake has gotten into the belief that is causing all of this violence and the sanctification of vendettas and of bloodshed and holy wars and all that stuff. It's gotten out of hand. Something went wrong. And I don't think you don't have to be a genius to know that and to recognize that. The problem is, what's a whole nation supposed to do? All right, what should Saudi Arabia do? That's the mentality. That's how the belief developed. To come along and say, well, don't do it, well, that's blasphemous. If you believe that that's what your mission in life is, and that that's what God wants of you, then how can you say don't do it? So that is not an option. To say, well, so what if you were taught that God wants you to go to holy wars? Don't. Refuse. That's not an option. So what's left? So you push it off. You don't want to think about it. It's too painful to think about. So you look away. You keep going. But how long can you do that? Another year, 5 years, 10 years. But how long can you keep going knowing that what you're doing is wrong? And you can't justify it. Not in your heart, not in your mind, certainly not in your soul. It doesn't feel right. So we can sit here and speculate and say, come on, doesn't the average Muslim in the Middle East feel that this violence has gone too far? But now we don't have to speculate anymore. It's become quite obvious, become quite clear. This stuff is not self-justifying. And it's not just not working anymore. It's not working anymore. Because here is a country, Iraq, comes along and says, holy war. And most of the Arab nations are saying no. So of course there's a political side to it. There are economic considerations. Are they saying no because they disagree in principle, or are they saying no because they don't want Saddam Hussein to be the leader? They want somebody else to lead the holy war. Is it because of financial reasons, economic reasons? Of course, there are always all sorts of issues. But by now we know that the heart of the issue in the Middle East is religious. And so when Iraq says, let's go on with our holy war, and other Arab nations say no, there's a confrontation right there. There's a lot of soul searching right there. So how will it happen? It's time. It's time. This violent lifestyle is a self-destruct thing. It can't go on forever. And so it's bound to end, and the sooner we confront it, the sooner it will end. And it looks like we're confronting it. We can no longer look away.
What will happen to the Jews?
What will happen to the Jews? Well, from what we just read in the Medrash, it seems that the confusion will involve the Jews as well. They'll also panic. Because we have a tendency of empathizing and suffering from other people's pains. And so we have to be reassured that this is not something we should panic about, because this is all happening because of the time of redemption has come. And it's not a time to get involved in more problems. And that's why it's important to read the Medrash, see what it says, see what it predicts, so that we know how to handle this next giant step towards Mashiach.
So what is it? How is it telling us how to handle it?
Well, it's telling us that what seems to be shaping up as a terrible disaster is really only a clearing of the air. And that, yes, it's going to be painful, but it'll be morally painful, not physically painful. And that what we're going to have to be, the world is going to be forced into doing is soul searching and coming to some sane and possibly painful conclusions about our values, about our beliefs, about our faith, and so on. And the result will be that the world will be infinitely better when the dust settles. So it's going to be confusing. We're going to panic. Our orientation will be challenged, and we'll have to reorient ourselves to a new way of thinking. But that's all very good. That's all very positive.
Do you see a parallel between the political level and the personal level in a lot of people's lives? A lot of people are living this state right now, personally.
Well, obviously, the individual in each of these countries is living with the same mistake. So it's not some kind of a vague collective conscience. It's an actual lifestyle for the individual. The person who lives with sanctified violence is involved in violence. The person who lives with sanctified or institutionalized anti-Semitism is involved in bigotry of all types. The person living in materialism, I mean, these are individuals. We're talking about private lives and how the private lives are affected by these things. So, yes, it's an issue that affects everybody, not just kings and soldiers. Because these are the issues we live with. These are the beliefs we live by that are being challenged. So nobody remains untouched, even as individuals.
Is there a difference in Jews doing tshuva now or this time out? Like, worried about some of that was going on, that Jews were returning in January, so.
Well, it's a good time of year. The month before Rosh Hashanah is the month of tshuva. And so it's all happening, it's all coming together very, shall we say, biblically? It's perfect.
Is there a difference with the Jews, between the Jews who are returning and who are doing on their own? Are they getting prepared for this time to come?
I think all Jews are getting to do more mitzvahs, are getting more into or closer to Judaism. The whole world is.
You don't think the panic will really going to change? You think the change is going to happen? You think people will...
Well, but these things are happening all along. The change is long overdue. How did we get this far without recognizing and admitting how wrong we are and so on? So the changes have been happening all along. And even so, even though this realization, let's say, has been dawning on us now for a long time, when it finally hits, we'll panic. When we finally have the courage to say, I was wrong. I was totally wrong. Everything I believed in, wrong. When you finally say that, it's very frightening. It's disorienting.
Are you describing, or are you describing an existence that's totally foreign to us because we're so used to being in the struggle of good and evil and dealing with that almost on an everyday basis? So how will existence be?
That's after the dust settles, we're talking about. You're saying that when the dust settles, we'll get disoriented again, because there'll be another change in our lives.
Right.
There won't be that struggle anymore. But that'll be a pleasant surprise. Where did all the evil go? It's a pleasant surprise.
There has to be something that's Roman Catholic before that happens.
Yeah.
Will a lot of people die?
No.
It won't be that sort of a thing.
No. No, it'll be an idealistic or ideological catalysm.
Sounds too good to be true.
Right. But that's the only change that is necessary. I don't see why we should believe in the morning after. What would be the point to that? And where did we get such a belief from anyway? Why do we believe in things that have no moral value? What would be the moral value of having another great big war and everybody gets shot? What, so we can make more documentaries? For the future generations? What would be the point in that? There's no point to that.
What was the point before?
It's a good question. But we didn't believe in it. The question is not why it happens. I don't know why it happens. I don't know a lot of things. The question is, why would anybody want to believe in it? Why would anybody insist, no, it must happen, I believe in it. There must be another war. Why? Where's that coming from? Habit? Faith comes from habit.
Well, there's no faith. It's just, well, it'll be the last time, so it's good to get, come here.
For old time's sake, let's just do it again one more time.
See this phenomena of kids who were, their thought of the future was a total state of panic. Like within religious circles, then you ask a kid what he's thinking about, and he might say, I'm thinking of the days of Mashiach. But for the secular world, the world's over. The world's not entering a new stage.
It wasn't long ago when they made that morning after thing, right? And it wasn't so long ago that all you heard about was how everybody is living in this dread fear of a nuclear disaster. You haven't heard it lately. I don't mean since you're here. Just for the last 2 years or so, that's not what people talk about. That hasn't been the talk around the dinner table.
Suicide pills or anything like that?
I haven't heard it. So, yeah, if you don't bring in the moral ingredient, if you don't introduce the moral ingredient, then you can believe almost anything. When you bring in the moral consideration, why would you believe that something must happen if it isn't a moral development? The only thing that must happen is that the world must become good, not dead.
Well, how does moral, whatever can be introduced, where does it come from? Moral.
It'll come from Mashiach. It'll come from the truth, from the godliness that is in the world but has been hidden. And in the course of time, with the passage of time, with more mitzvahs performed into the world, the godliness becomes a little less hidden and a little closer to the surface, and the evil becomes a little more obvious. Or as one of the prophets writes about the days before Mashiach, that what's going to happen is that Yizbareru v'yislabnu, that things will become clear and obvious. Things that were hidden, confused, misunderstood, will all become clear. There'll be no hidden evils. It'll all be out in the open. That doesn't mean that we will discover evil where we never thought it was. It means that the evil will no longer be able to wear a cloak of morality or of goodness, and people won't be able to sweep it under the carpet anymore. Evil is evil, and there are no more games. And the same with goodness. The hidden goodness will no longer be hidden. It will be revealed. Revealed means obvious. Obvious means undeniable. When we can no longer deny the evil of evil, and we can no longer deny the goodness of goodness, then we've got a sane world, a moral world. So on the one hand, we're saying it's the ultimate miracle. Yeah, because we've gone 5,000 years without being able to do this. So in practical terms, in historical terms, it will be a big miracle. It'll be a radical, dramatic, catalysmic change in the nature of people. But in terms of faith, in the arena of faith, this isn't a miracle, it's an inevitability. But that's true of Mashiach himself. On the one hand, the coming of Mashiach, what could be more miraculous than that? And on the other hand, hey, we've believed in Mashiach for 3,000 years. We've been waiting for him to come. So what's the miracle? Or what's the surprise? Or what's the excitement? And yet when he comes, it'll be very surprising and very exciting. So to our faith, it is not a miracle, but that's the way it is. To your faith, nothing is a miracle. Or to your faith, Mashiach not coming is a miracle. But historically, it is a miracle.
So there will be evil in the world even afterwards?
No.
There won't be.
No. Once evil is obvious, it's no longer.
So first the evil will be revealed clearly.
And then it's gone.
Where is it?
It disappears, or it gets sublimated into goodness, or rechanneled, or recycled, I don't know. But the point that evil can only exist in a charade. Blatant evil, obvious evil, does not survive, does not exist.
That's because people want to do good.
I think it's more than want to. It's just the nature of things that which is obviously false cannot be perpetuated. Now, if you want to tell a lie, don't make it obvious, or it's not going to fly.
What's the shoes doing now?
Right now? I give up. What's he doing? I don't know.
This thing with Eastern Europe, though, like you're saying atheism is over. But what's coming out of there is that, okay, this totalitarian regime is over, and democracy is coming, and capitalism is coming, and anti-Semitism is coming also. I mean, we hear a lot, unless it's exaggerated, that there's a rise in anti-Semitism. Like, why should we think that people are becoming more moral?
Oh, they are. They are. It's not surprising that a change of ideology doesn't bring an immediate change in behavior. It took 60 years to instill atheism in the people of Eastern Europe. It wasn't like one morning they woke up and they said, okay, we're atheists now, and everybody threw out their Bibles. It takes time. Maybe everybody agreed to be an atheist in principle, but it takes time. You have to unlearn certain ways of thinking. You have to unlearn certain habits and so on. So it's not surprising that when a great improvement takes place in terms of ideology, now the belief is correct, the commitment is the correct one, the new goal is an improved goal, the new striving is a striving for better. Does that mean that every little bureaucrat has unlearned his habits and has changed his spots? No, it'll take time. It'll take time. So if there's anti-Semitism there, I'd like to think that it's habitual anti-Semitism. But the ideology has gone out of it. And if there's still some communism lingering, it's just because of the force of habit. Because it hasn't been unlearned yet. But there isn't a strong commitment or belief to it. I think the same is true with the secularism in the United States or the materialism in the United States. Of course we're still materialistic, even after the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s. Of course we're still materialistic, but we don't have that same urgency, that same commitment, that same passion. That's been taken out of it.
How do we know that Mashiach is being
He has to be a son of David. He has to be the king. Sounds like a man.
You're going to have a wife?
I would hope so. We don't believe in celibacy, you know.
Has materialism just become institutionalized? Is that the passion's gone out because it's just part of the norm now?
What's gone up?
Huh?
What's gone up?
No. Has it materialism become institutionalized as opposed to you mentioned that the
Oh yeah,
passion-
yeah. But that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. We were institutionalizing materialism since the 30s. But now it's like it's lost its steam. We don't really believe in it anymore. I don't think any thoughtful American thinks that if Russia becomes capitalist in its business, that will solve its problems, that will cure all its ills. We've got our own ills. We know that. So we're not so smug in our belief anymore.
Wasn't it also a prophecy that these governments would collapse? There was something in the Midrash about, I don't know, I heard this story that the governments would collapse when this person changed his shoes or, I don't know what I'm talking about. There was something that I had heard that it was prophesied. No?
I know that one of the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, about 200 years ago, writes in one of his books, he writes that before the coming of Mashiach, the Russian Empire will dissolve into small pieces. So that's a recent prediction, relatively speaking.
Are there prophetic dates in the Medrash that point to these times?
The Medrash says what will happen. The Medrash carefully avoids saying when. So we'll know that it's happening by what is happening. And if we look at the world today, it's happening. I mean, the Rebbe said a year and a half ago that this coming year would be a year of miracles. So you believe it, you don't believe it, you trust him, you don't trust him. But now, there's no question anymore. It happened. It happened. When the Berlin Wall came down, every newspaper in the entire world called it a miracle. They had different words, different terms. Amazing, what was the words they used? Phenomenal. All different ways of saying miraculous. Jews coming out of Russia is certainly a miraculous year for Jews. Israel getting all these new people coming in. This is all miraculous stuff. And if you want a definition How do we distinguish a nice development from a miraculous development? The miraculous development is anything that a year ago you would have insisted was not going to happen. If a year ago you would have said, no, then when it happens, it's a miracle. And you know anybody who a year ago said that Jews will be coming out of Russia by the tens of thousands a month? Nobody. Did anybody say the Berlin Wall might come down? Might? No, nobody. Nobody. Did anybody say apartheid would be disavowed by South Africa? Nobody. And the best proof of it is that with all of these Jews coming into Israel, nobody's ready. Nobody has houses built, nobody has jobs, nobody's ready because nobody believed it. So when it happens, when something happens that nobody could have believed, then that's a miracle. Or if they said it couldn't be done and it's done, that's a miracle.
Oh,